Hello, welcome to the Plumes of Oz. Today we want to talk about a special wader, the red-necked avocet. A stunning bird. Red head, red neck. Still got a little bit of pied component, as all avocets have. But that red head, red neck, it jumps out. It would win the beauty competition of the avocets. These birds, they breed in southeastern Australia. They can tell when it's going to rain because the breeding pairs take off. They head out into the clay pans. And as the lakes form, the shrimp grow. The birds arrive and feed and fatten and breed. However, in Australia, salt lakes don't last that long. They evaporate. Then the birds become nomadic. They take off, spreading over continental Australia. Some will go to Tasmania, maybe New Zealand, but the greater majority will remain in mainland Australia. One of the best experiences I ever had with red-necked avocets was at Stockton. When you drive through urban Newcastle, you cross over the Hunter River. At the apex of the bridge, you can look down onto the Stockton Sandspit, and if it's high tide, you will be lucky enough to see a congregation of birds. When I went the first time, there were several thousand birds there. I parked the car and looked out. It was a phenomenon. And the reason why it was a phenomenon, amongst all those birds, including the Arctic waders and a lot of indigenous birds, the redheads of the red-necked avocets stood out and gave that scene a lot of vibrancy, which is still a vivid memory today. They are such a spectacular bird. So with this in mind, I'd like to take you back to the Hunter River Estuary and see if we can capture the red-necked avocet, Recurvi roster, Nova Hollande.
Our first stop is Kooragang Island. Here we can see this beautiful red-capped, red-necked avocet. He's wandering through the mud. Watch now the way he feeds. The bill moves from side to side in a scythe-type action, and the depth that he goes to with the bill is determined by his feet. His bill goes down toward the mud, chasing worms. The most important thing about the feeding sites for the avocets is that they need shallow water or shallow water over a mud bank where there are crustacea and worms present. Again at Kooragang Island, this bird is interesting. He has pale patches around his red face. As he feeds, you can see the lower part of the mandible is shorter than the upper bill. The lower part is the one that scrapes against the mud. It's wearing, and the elderly grey look matches the shorter length of the bill. This is an older bird. On the insert, you can see that there is an older bird on the left and two younger ones to the right. Here now, crossing over the Hunter River, we go to Hexham Swamp. There are good numbers of avocets here. Notice also that the black-winged stilt is present. These are in a way cousins. They have a commonality in their feeding requirements, but the interesting thing is that though both birds are feeding on the same invertebrates, the birds get along well. If they were honey eaters, they would be aggressively guarding the feeding ground. I suspect there is a minute subtle difference in the micro diet for both birds. Though they can both pick out shrimp and worms from the water, their feeding action is different. The stilt has more of a probing action, whereas the avocet has a sideways scything action. Feeding sites for avocets are preferably shallow. After rain to the inland, lakes develop. and this is to where the avocets will fly to feed, then breed. Mostly they eat anostracans, or fairy and brine shrimp, in combination with larvae of insects. Once the lake has formed, the invertebrates develop rapidly. The brine shrimp and the fairy shrimp have eggs that lay in the dust, but with water contact, these ponds, within 4 days of the rain, become an invertebrate microculture. The avocets are not the only ones who know about this developing food bank. The amphibians and other waders also arrive at the same time. Burrowing frogs dig out of their caverns and are first on the scene. These frogs breed up quickly, so the avocets have quite a bit of competition. That is why they don't dilly-dally. The avocets get there quickly. They know that there is a limited duration of these invertebrates in the lake water. So they get there quickly, getting ready to breed before the lake evaporates. In the Hunter Estuary area, there is high tide and low tide, feeding and sleeping. When the avocet sleeps, they tuck their bill under the wing and close one eye. This is known as hemispherical sleep. Many birds are capable of hemispherical sleep, and in this phase the bird is inactive. Some birds can retain activity during hemispherical sleep. These are the long-range seabirds and the swifts. The avocet's biological clock is set around feeding and roosting. They roost at high tide. Here at Stockton, as the tides rise, they will come in first to the sandbar in the river. Then, onto the foreshore. As the tide continues to rise, they will move into the shallow waters of the lagoon of the Stockton Sandspit. Look at the lagoon now. It is filled with waders. Just an amazing sight. Only a short distance from the urbanisation of Newcastle City, separated only by the river. Many other waders will come into this lagoon, but the most spectacular of all is the red-necked avocet. Back at Hexham Swamp there is another high tide roosting site under the shadow of Mount Sugarloaf. A small sandbar that allows the birds to rest. More birds flying into roost. On this occasion, some of them have landed in the water. The reason for this was a raptor alert. There was a whistling kite flying around. They know the whistling kite doesn't swim on the water, so they believe there is safety there. However, as we know, this is a false sense of security. The old proverb, birds of a feather flock together, is well illustrated when it comes to roosting. The various species maintain their group identity. The avocets like to be together, as do the black-winged stilts and the godwits and other waders. With the lagoon filled with birds, the late arrivals have to be content to stay on the foreshore. On a hot summer's day, this is not really a disadvantage because they can have their feet in the water. Many waders, including the avocets, have a countercurrent mechanism of circulation in the lower limb, so this allows them to keep cool even though they are standing in the hot sun. As the tide goes out, so roosting comes to an end, and they return to the feeding grounds. Sexual dimorphism in the avocet is subtle. The female has a shorter, more upcurved bill, and the dark primaries have more pale speckling. Here is the female. Well, here at the Hunter River, we have been watching these avocets feed for quite some time. As mentioned, they eat mainly microscopic food, but it is good to see them eat something definitive. And here, we will finish with a catch. It's a worm, caught by the male.